Hello, boys and girls. I missed you all so much. I hope everyone is doing a lot of really good, hard work for your teachers. I thought I would share some stories with you. My first story is called Owen at the Park. It's written by Scott Ritchie. Owen has a very interesting job in New York City. Owen at the Park. Owen worked in the park with his dad. Most of the time, it was boring. Owen would sweep the long boulevards or rake the leaves while his dad mowed the lawns. But once a week, there was a job that Owen loved, and this morning he was going to do it by himself. For a shy boy like Owen, the first part of the job was difficult. Just be friendly and firm, said his dad as he looked at his watch. Owen stepped onto the lawn. He took a deep breath and walked up to a family having a picnic. He delivered his speech, but he mumbled, so he had to say it again. At first they looked confused. Then they gathered their things and hurried away. I wonder what his message is. Some people had to be woken up, or interrupted in the middle of a game of checkers, or tapped on the shoulder while reading a book. One family didn't understand, so Owen had to act it out. He tried to shoo the geese away, but they chased him all the way to the lake. Owen had to hurry. It was nearly time. Owen ran through the park. Now he was shouting. He startled a baby, a sleeping dog, then a flock of starlings burst from the trees. It was so noisy that Owen covered his ears. He reached the end of the boulevard and he looked back. He had done it. Owen couldn't stop smiling. Now for the fun part. Owen turned the tap. Look what's happening. Jets of water arced across the lawn and the path, splashing tree trunks, flower beds, and anybody who hadn't listened to Owen. An hour later, the lawn was soaked. Owen turned off the tap. Everything was quiet, except for the water dripping from the leaves. Wow, what a fantastic job he had. He gets to help water the park each week. All right, my next book is one called Extra Yarn. Now, I love this book because I like to work with yarn too. I like to do something called crocheting. Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett. On a cold afternoon, in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from the chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she still had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars, too. But there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had some extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet," shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone. Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did. Even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton. and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone, except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore a sweater or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then Annabel still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and the cats, and for all the other animals too. Soon Annabel will have to run out of yarn. But it turns out she didn't. So Annabel made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn. And when people came to visit from around the world to see the sweaters and to shake Annabel's hand. One day, an archduke, who was very fond of clothes, sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabel. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to offer you $1,000,000. "No, thank you," said Annabel, who was knitting a scarf for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. "2,000,000, he said. Annabel shook her head. "No, thanks." "10,000,000, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabel. "I won't sell you the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabel's house. And they stole the box, and they took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. Back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box, and he lifted its lid and looked inside. His mustache quivered, it shivered, it trembled. The archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." Look, the box is empty. But, wow, look, here it is in the sea. Look, it made its way all the way back to Annabel. It turned out she was. The end. All right, boys and girls, I miss you, and I hope I get to see everybody soon. Have a good day.